All right, since the NFL draft has completed, a lot of you guys are starting to do your Dynasty Rookie Drafts. Now, through mock drafts and real drafts, there has been one player that I have seen rise up boards, and I personally believe that you guys should be avoiding this player. And let me explain why, okay? The player is Tyler Allgeier. Now, we were on a live stream a couple days ago, and someone drafted this player in the first round. And I was caught off guard. I just didn't really understand, and the chat was really backing it up that it was the right move. So I just want to help you guys understand where I'm coming from. Now, if after this video you still think Allgeier should be considered in the first round or early second, then all props to you. You make the decisions that you feel like you need to make. But I just want to help shed some light as to why I am avoiding him, especially at that ADP. So Tyler Allgeier, drafted in the 5th round out of BYU. Now Mike Davis has officially been released from this team. Cordero Patterson was paid, so I believe he will serve as the RB1. And they still could bring in some free agent running backs. They also have a couple other running backs on their roster. But regardless of what you think of if Allgeier will be the RB1 or not, let's just talk about the history of the 5th round running back in the NFL and how it relates to fantasy. Okay, now this might be a little bit all over the place, but I'm gonna try my absolute best to convey how I best can why I think this is a reach for him to be in the first round, early second, okay? So let's look at all the running backs drafted in the 5th round in the last decade. I went through every single draft since 2012, and I looked at every single running back in the 5th round. I looked at their career stats. I looked at how long they were in the NFL. Hopefully I'm able to share screenshots. So I included their carries, so their opportunities, the amount of touchdowns they had in their career, and the amount of years that they spent in the NFL. Okay, hopefully you'll be able to see that here now on your screen. So I want to help bring a wider perspective. Now, first off, before I say anything, if you really believe in Tyler Allgeier, comment down below. Tell me why you believe in him. And as you're commenting, hopefully I can steer you off of the path if you believe in what I'm saying. All right, so obviously we see all these running backs. Now the running backs that are blue, those are running backs that I considered fantasy relevant running backs, meaning running backs that at some point in their career, you could have either started them or flexed them. Okay, now this is not gonna be a perfect science. And then you can also see the running backs in purple, Jordan Howard and Aaron Jones. These are the absolute studs of the 5th round in the last decade. Guys who have finished top 12 in multiple years. So let's discuss this. Since 2012, let's discuss fantasy relevancy of a 5th round running back. All right, could Tyler Allgeier be in that category, this blue category of players who have been relevant in fantasy? All right, this category includes, again, players that you could start or flex at some point in their career. From this list, there are 29 players. I see 7 players, 7 running backs that I would consider in this list right now since in the last decade. That would be fantasy relevant. Chris Thompson, Mike Gillislee, Jay Ajayi, Alex Collins, Kenneth Gainwell in his rookie year, Jordan Howard, and Aaron Jones. These are all players that I would look at and say, yeah, at some point, you could probably put them in your flex or start them, right? Obviously, Jordan Howard and Aaron Jones are in a different category. So since 2012, if we're looking at fantasy relevant running backs, 24.1% of 5th round running backs have been in this category, okay? So just over 24% of running backs have been even relevant enough to start. How many of them have turned into absolute stud running backs that have finished top 12 in back-to-back years? Well, because we need to figure out, could Tyler Allgeier be a stud? Because if he can't, there's no way you should be spending 1st round draft capital on him, okay? So this category includes players who have finished top 12 in multiple years. Aaron Jones, Jordan Howard, that's it. 2 players out of the 29 running backs since 2012. That is 7% of 5th round running backs who fall into this category. It is highly unlikely, now you might see him in a different light, that Tyler Allgeier ever ends up developing into the type of talent that a Jordan Howard and an Aaron Jones were, okay? Now, if you disagree with me, you see something different in Tyler Allgeier, I can respect that. Pre-draft rankings, I had him as my RB11, purely based off of talent. So I do like him, but I'm not very high on this class as a whole. I think a lot of these middle running backs are just going to end up being role players, all right? But let's keep going. Let's look at the career average touchdowns, okay? So average touchdowns in their whole career. First, let's look at those 22 running backs that were not fantasy relevant, okay? Again, 22 running backs. These are all the running backs that are just in the black text, okay? All those guys, if you combine their averages, they averaged 3.2 touchdowns in their career. Now, if we want to add the 5 blue fantasy relevant players, so 27 guys altogether. So we add in the stats of Chris Thompson, Mike Gesicki, Jay Ajayi, Alex Collins, and Kenneth Gainwell. Now your average of touchdowns in your career goes to 4.1. Okay, so it's not all that impressive. But again, we do have the exception of Aaron Jones and Jordan Howard, who almost have 80 rushing touchdowns between them. So I guess my biggest question, and you need to answer this question, do you genuinely believe that Tyler Allgeier can develop into a top 12 running back talent in the NFL at some point in his career? Do you think he can be an Aaron Jones, talent-wise, a Jordan Howard, talent-wise? If yes, then ignore me, okay, and take him wherever you want. But if you believe, like me, that he is just a middle-of-the-pack talent type of running back, based off the film that I studied this offseason, then I think we probably need to avoid him if that is going to be his ADP, a first-round draft capital in rookie drafts. Secondly, what I want to look at is the NFL lifespan and production, okay? Because, again, I don't believe that Tyler Allgeier can be Aaron Jones or Jordan Howard. I'm not going to include them in this model, okay? So let's look at the years in the NFL. You know, the players on your screen that you see the category still in the NFL, I did not include them because we wouldn't be able to get an accurate representation of how long they lasted in the NFL. But there were 19 non-fantasy relevant running backs, okay? And their average time in the NFL is just over 3 years. Just over 3 years for those 19 non-fantasy relevant 5th round running backs. How about if we add those four fantasy relevant players, right? Like I said, Thompson, Gesicki, Ajayi, and who else did I say there? And Alex Collins, okay? If we add them, then the lifespan of all these players ends up being 3.6 years in the NFL. And what is the most important thing for a fantasy running back? Well, it's, do I think this fantasy running back is going to get a long-term contract? So, lastly, since 2012, only one running back has received a long-term contract from their team. Most of these running backs were moved from their team after a year. They were a little bit relevant in year one and then weren't used again because they were 5th round picks and they got replaced. But there was one running back who got a long-term contract, and that is Aaron Jones in Green Bay. As we all know, he is the one of all of these guys who is able to get a long-term deal. So while we see the opportunity for Tyler Allgeier here opening up with Mike Davis going, I don't think the talent is there for me to believe in him long-term. And if I am truly thinking about the future of the Atlanta backfield, what will stop them next year from drafting one of these potentially elite running backs in the 2023 class? Is Tyler Allgeier really going to show enough for them to say, I think we got our guy, okay? Because if we look at the history of the 5th round running back, they are not prioritized in free agency. They are not given second contracts. And typically, most of these guys got work in year one, and then they died off because they were replaced the very next year. The status of the RB in the NFL is that it is very easily replaced. So if you are truly looking for a running back, maybe it's best to trade for a running back. If you're going to spend a 1st round draft capital on Tyler Allgeier, why don't you go use that 1st round pick and trade for someone who's a little bit more solidified, who had earlier draft capital, who maybe was a 1st or 2nd round pick, right? Like a Miles Sanders comes to mind, for example. So I think we are potentially overdrafting Tyler Allgeier because we're excited about the opportunity. If Tyler Allgeier goes out there and scores 8 to 10 points per game in fantasy. Does that make you feel like he's safe in year 2? No, for me, it doesn't. So I looked at my Superflex rankings, which you can find on Patreon if you support us over there. And I really looked at this and I said, where is the earliest I am okay to draft Tyler Allgeier? Because like I said, he was drafted, I think, at the 110 recently. I've seen him early as a 201. This is too high for me, guys. So I currently have him ranked as my 24th player in Superflex formats. That includes quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends. Okay, 24th player. So if you're in a 12-team league, I would consider him at the 212. That's where I think his proper value is. Second round, 12th pick. Okay. However, I think the earliest I'd be willing to try and bet on him would be the 208. Okay. If you're drafting him ahead of the 208, I think we are maybe not considering the history of the 5th round running back. Now, look, if Tyler Allgeier breaks the mold and he is truly that 1% player like Aaron Jones, I will hold my hands up and I will say I was wrong. However, watching his film, evaluating him as a player, I do not see that. I see a good role player, someone who can play a role, but not someone who can break that mold. So does Tyler Allgeier end up in this blue category of player who can be a starter for you at some point? Maybe. Maybe he ends up in that 24%. But my projections for him is either he's a black text player or a blue text player, meaning he's either going to be irrelevant after a couple years or he'll be a starter for a couple of years. But I don't think I want to spend first round draft capital on someone like that. So I hope that helps. I hope you get where I'm coming from. If you have any questions, let me know. I know this isn't a perfect science, but I really wanted to help people understand why I think that is a bad move. Now, if Tyler Allgeier is there in the 3rd round, snap him up, of course. But please, 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 I'm begging you, do not spend a 1st round pick on Tyler Allgeier. People are drafting him over guys like Jahan Dotson, Alec Pierce. I don't understand it. I don't think it's the right move. So comment down below. Let me know what you think. You could think I'm an idiot. That's all right.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos.
Watch
now,
it.
You can also subscribe.
Right now.
If you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/FantasyLand fam.